We break down the Charlotte Hornets weekend that, yes, saw another injury on the season. And, of course, Doug brings the mock drafts all today on Locked On Hornets.
You're Locked On Hornets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
In a minute, cuz we live.
It's Locked On Hornets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team every day. Thanks for making us your first listen. We're free and we're available anywhere you get your pods. First-time users, by the way, can receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with promo code Locked On if you use PrizePicks, the sponsor of today's show. So that's PrizePicks.com. Promo code Locked On. We appreciate their support as always. I'm Walker Mail. You can find me on WFNZ from 12 to 3. That's Doug Branson. You can find him in a substack on everyhornetsboxscore.com. He's sleeping though. Why are you sleeping, Doug?
I'm not sleeping. I'm looking at the box score. I'm trying to pull up the box score from this.
So that
Chicago
looked
game.
very. I mean, you're gonna have to go back and check this out once you publish this video to YouTube.
I'm looking down. I'm looking down. My eye. I think
good.
that people like make fun of like celebrities for sleeping at games. They're not sleeping. They're just looking down at their phone, and the camera being such that it is makes it look like they're sleepy.
No, and I look down at because of my setup, I am looking down at the screen constantly. The way you look down, though, because I've been doing this with you for a while, and it didn't quite look Brian Windhorst-esque like it did right there. It looked like you fell asleep trying to report on the television what was going on. But now here we're back, baby. Doug Branson, he's awake and he's fired up. He brought mock drafts. We'll get to those in the last segment. I don't know if you're fired up, though, to talk about what happened this past weekend, though, because there was a lot of injuries. There was a lot of, I guess, young baby bees out there that weren't getting the job done as much, although there are some nice things to talk about here. And so we can get to James Bouknight, his ability to hit 5 threes in this last outing. That was fun. But of course, some of these guys get opportunities, Doug, because of another injury. PJ Washington exits the game against Chicago 2 contests ago. They're calling it a right foot sprain. Don't know if he's going to suit up the rest of the season. I know it's not like they ruled him out, but we'll see. So PJ Washington out. Unfortunate because he was playing very well in a contract season, but I don't know how much time we're going to get from him as the season comes to a close.
It just really has been extraordinary, the number of ankle injuries and the number of injuries in general that this team has sustained. Every year, you're going to have players in and out of the lineup. Steve Clifford talks about it all the time. It's part of the NBA. You got to just deal with the players you have and, develop a game plan that you can win with whoever you have available. But this seems like a lot, right? I mean, this seems extraordinary. PJ turning his ankle. You said it. They called it a foot sprain. I think they literally cannot bring themselves to say that another player has an ankle injury. Like there's trauma around the word and this organization at this point. They're just like, call it anything else. The ankle is on the foot, right? All right, call it a foot sprain. Right?
Mm-hmm. Well, and they did this with Dennis Smith Jr. Did you see the report going into Chicago for DSJ? Did you see that they called it a great toe sprain? Did you see that?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Okay, yes, I did see that.
So,
a great
right. Like,
listen, I've sprained my toe. It's not great. I'll tell you that right now.
It's not great. It's not great whatsoever. And of course, we can go ahead and probably guess that it's the big toe. I just never heard of it as the great toe, especially if it's sprained. But yeah,
if we're talking about toe rankings, I mean, the big toe is obviously up there. But I mean,
it's
don't
great.
listen.
I think it's number 1.
Okay, but don't sleep on the pinky toe. I mean, when you're trying to balance, that pinky toe is crucial.
I mean, I guess so. I'd still, if I had to cut one toe off, it'd be the pinky. Wow. Just if that was the thing. If I had to, if we were playing that game.
It's also the easiest one to clip when you're taking the nail clippers to it. Like, it's just like boom, boom. I mean, the big toe, you got to spend time, trying to get that toenail off. The pinky is just like bang, bang.
Oh, yeah, that's kind of gross. Anyways, let's go to some other things instead of the toe conversation. So a couple of other people, they got opportunities in this weekend. Doug, I think we start with James Bouknight, to be honest. James Bouknight against Chicago, 8 of 16 from the field, 6 of 11 from 3. You see what he did yesterday in a matinee game against Toronto. James Bouknight comes off of the bench and he hits 5 of his 7 3-pointers taken. He's been more of a threat from deep than he has finishing at the rim, which wasn't really his college MO. He was the guy that was going to attack and finish at the rim at an elite level, and you were hoping everything else would come along. What did you make of James Bouknight's weekend?
I thought that game against Chicago, despite the loss, was the most complete game that I've seen him play in a while, because he was doing it with his shot, obviously, the 6 threes. Was a career, I want to say it was career tying. I don't know if it was career high. I have to check that because he's hit a lot of three-pointers in his time here, in his short time. So, but he was doing it with his pass. He was doing it with his defense, which I think he followed up with in the second game this weekend against Toronto. And Clifford even made a mention of it after the game, saying that, he made an impact with his on-ball defense, which is not something that we've really associated with Bouknight since he's joined the Charlotte Hornets, but he has really improved both his defensive effort and just the details required to stay in front of guys in the NBA. And he was also fighting off some switches in that game against Toronto. He was able to really make an impact there. And, just those little instances of him getting caught, falling asleep on defense, getting back cut, just not paying attention, all those things. I didn't see a lot of that against Chicago or Toronto. And what you really like is that he's putting together back-to-back performances. Because I thought there was an interesting quote from Clifford after the Toronto game. He wasn't specifically referencing James Bouknight, but he essentially said, I'm paraphrasing here, but he essentially said, that most guys in the NBA, that if you give them enough run, can go out there and score 20 points on a given night. But it's really about, can you score 15 or 16 4 or 5 nights in a row? So that, I think that if you're looking for how is Bouknight and all of the young players, how are they being evaluated by Clifford? I think it's based on that. It's consistency of play. It's not necessarily can you go out there and have one great night. It's about can you put together back-to-back performances where the team plays better when you're on the floor. And I think Bouknight achieved this. Walker, I would call this a start because we talked about this when we were talking about him first playing, getting some run. What could he do in this last sequence? And, I said, look, he can come out here and really open my eyes. I would say my eyes are half open at this point. I'm starting to get intrigued. This is a start for me.
Yeah, 100%. I'm glad you brought up Steve Clifford post Toronto because he didn't say 20. He said 22, which was interesting because I was totally reading on James Bouknight as well. I was like, okay, I know who you're talking about. But then you go check the box score and he scored 21. But Clifford was discussing, look, it's not about if you can come out here and score 22. Everybody in the league can do that. It's if you can come out here and then give you 15 or 16 4 times a week. That's what he said, which is, what you were discussing. And so that clearly was in reference to Bouknight, who also had 20 against Chicago.
Well, we're making I'm just saying we're making assumptions here.
Sure. Yes, for sure. Yes, we are making assumptions. If you would have gotten the exact point total right, then I'm not sure we would be making assumptions. We would.
Well, these numbers. Look, these numbers are a little. You can fudge these numbers a little bit. I mean, the Hornets are telling me that they've sold the building out 15 times. That they were just short of a 16 sellout against Toronto. I checked with David Walker, who was in the building. More tales from Spectrum Center, I'm sure, coming up later this week. And I was like, hey, did that building look almost sold out? And he was like, no. So, it's just interesting timing, by the way. All this, if you've been paying attention to the Hornets and you read the Observer a lot and you're just seeing the word sellout being thrown out there a lot, I'll just say interesting timing with all of this team sale news on the horizon that you're hearing about Hornets selling out in a year when they're at the 4th worst record in the NBA.
Well, and to be fair, James Bouknight did have 22 the night prior, right? Or 2 nights prior. So he had 22 against Chicago and 21 against Toronto. You're right. Call it assumption if you want to. I'm going to assume he's discussing James Bouknight in mind. And Steve Clifford, very long-winded answer. Somebody asked him after Toronto, how much of these games right now matter towards the future more so than what you're learning for the rest of this season? And he said it was a good question and then answered it very thoroughly, as Steve Clifford is one to do. If he's intrigued by a question, he'll spend all day on it, which is honestly great. It's fun to listen to him talk like that. And he was discussing how as a coach, you learn something every day, gave you a little bit of a cliche, but he said our job as a coach is to be an expert on every single one of these players, right? Mm-hmm. You got to know what makes them tick. You have to understand what they do well, and then maybe you learn something that they are improving on themselves. And then so in the same media interaction, that's when he also drops some of the sound bites on James Bouknight. And he is giving you a start. You're right, Doug. It's great to see, to be honest with you, because this was not an opportunity anybody expected. Rod Boone was laughing at you in the Charlotte Observer comment section for asking if Bouknight was going to get any time.
Me?
And he said, "You mean in Greensboro? Like you mean in Greensboro? Is that what you mean?" Yeah, like that was when the writers, or that's when the readers were asking him questions like, "No, Bouknight's not going to get a chance." And he was right. He wasn't. Bouknight was not going to get one of those chances, but 7 players are out. The top 7, you could argue. Like with Mark Williams maybe being the only other one that you could argue, everybody else top 7 not playing in this game.
Yeah.
And so Bouknight's getting a shot because of it, and 20 points apiece, man. That's good. That's good to see.
Well, taking some tough shots too. I mean, and knocking down some tough shots. And look, he's got the prettiest jumper on the team, right? I mean, all the guys that shoot well on this team have ugly jumpers. Let's just be honest. Like they're not beautiful to watch. Bouknight's jumper.
Okay, you think like over everybody?
Oh yeah. Who are you going to throw at me?
But you mean everybody that's playing right now, or even the injured guys?
No, even the injured guys. I'm saying he has the prettiest jump shot on the team.
Okay.
Give me a name.
Well, no, honestly, I didn't think any of them had like ugly ones. Like I didn't.
Yeah, I mean,
Kelly's.
Look, LaMelo knocks it down and he gets it out quick, but that is not a pretty looking jump shot.
You're right. Like LaMelo, no, I'll take
PJ's.
LaMelo.
I'm not. Again, it's smooth, but I'm just
Put that up to the comment section. I'm interested to see if they thought that as well. Like PJ and Kelly, right. I don't even think Terry's is ugly.
Okay, here's the point. This is a start for Bouknight. He's got to continue. He's got to have a great summer. Okay, and he's got to work tremendously hard in the summer. He's got to stay healthy, because he was out all last summer, and Clifford put some of gave him a little bit of a built-in excuse. He's talked about, look, Bouknight lost an entire summer. It's going to be difficult to have a great year when you've lost that summer. I think he will get a chance to compete in summer league, training camp, and then, get an opportunity in the rotation, and he's got to take advantage of it then, and he's got to continue, to put these performances together. So, again, great start.
All right. Yeah. Plus, yeah, I mean, we'll see. I like what you're seeing from James Bouknight. Of course you do. Hopefully the first rounder can figure it out. All right. Let's keep on going. Coming up next, Locked On Hornets podcast.
Don't go to sleep on the Hornets just yet.
We'll take a look at the new CBA, some of the things that we think are most important to note from that. Plus, we have some other observations over the weekend we can get to as well. But I did want to discuss PrizePicks. This episode is brought to you by PrizePicks. It's an app where you can pick 2 to 6 players, and if they score more or less than their PrizePicks projection, you can win up to 25 times your money on any entry. And there's no competing against other people. It's just you versus those projections available. They offer projections on really any sport you watch, too. That includes the NBA, NFL, MLB, NHL, PGA, men's and women's college basketball, which is coming to a close, tonight's championship game in the men's tournament, WNBA, esports, plenty of other sports to get involved in. Entries can be made in 60 seconds or less. It's that easy. You have safe and fast withdrawals. They're currently operational in over 30 states and even Canada as well. Download the PrizePicks app or go to prizepicks.com to sign up and play daily fantasy sports. First-time users can receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with promo code Locked On. If you deposit $100, PrizePicks gives you $100. If you deposit $50, PrizePicks gives you $50. Don't forget to enter promo code Locked On at sign up for an instant deposit match up to $100. A couple more segments to go. Locked On Hornets.
This is Locked On Hornets.
Golden State spent almost a minuscule amount of time with 0 of their starters out on the floor. They had at least one out there the entire time.
You have 4 Hall of Famers.
Yeah, they do.
And so you just put them anywhere.
You just have one out
Stack
there.
them up.
It's time for more of the Locked On Hornets podcast.
All right, Doug, you have a conspiracy theory that you revealed over the weekend, and I would argue, too, that maybe it's not James Bouknight who has the best jumper, but it might be Nick Richards who has the best-looking jumper on the entire team. He hit a 3 over the weekend, and you think that this is actually something legitimately a part of his bag, and the Hornets are only deploying it as the season ends, so next year he can come out firing fresh off his contract.
I'm just saying, when Nick Richards hit that 3 with the shot clock on his back, he didn't heave it up there. It didn't look awkward to me. It looked like someone that had, because you can't fake it. I mean, you either look smooth with the jumper or you don't. Either you've practiced it enough where it looks good, especially in that pressure situation. You either have done that or you have not done that. And I think based on that evidence, he has done that. So my conspiracy theory is, yes, that Nick Richards actually has a decent shot, and they've been, hiding that candle under a bushel until they can deploy it. Because, look, they've extended him. I get the feeling that the organization knows something that maybe we don't know about Nick Richards' ceiling. And that ceiling extends if he can hit a three. Because, look, none of the centers that they have on the roster right now can hit a three. Like, at some point, they've got to have some big that can hit a three.
Right. And Kai will take him. Mark is not taking him. And apparently, Nick is the only one that has. I mean, Kai Jones has hit one this year, but Nick Richards 100% right now from 3-point range. So it's great to see. You did get to see all three centers, by the way, play against Chicago. That game was out of hand. And so eventually all three of them played. That did not happen against Toronto. Just to give you a little update on the center rotation, Nick Richards did not play because of the coach's decision. Kai Jones got
because they were mad at him. Here's the thing. I'm speculating here, but I'm speculating that they were mad at him for taking that three and revealing the secret weapon that is Nick Fury Richards.
It was a DNP-C3 instead of a CD. That's what happened with Nick Richards. He did not play because of the three-pointer that he took against Chicago. So Kai Jones, though, he got minutes at the 4 and 5. And, Doug, at the beginning of this game, Steve Clifford talked about getting more minutes for Kai at the center spot. But he played quite a bit of minutes at the power forward spot again against the Raptors. And so this is one of those things that's a little confusing to me. I guess they continue to experiment. But if you don't have Nick Richards, then you think there would be plenty of minutes for Kai Jones to only play at the center spot. But that didn't really happen. You would have Kai Jones at 4. Mark Williams would come in, and you just have a big old front line if you're Charlotte. So, and to me, it's pretty clear that Kai Jones is playing better at the center. You saw it in that game against Toronto. Very active, down low, close to the basket. He had a couple of awesome blocks. I just looked at Kai as active, right? Which is something you could describe him really with a lot of these games, but I thought that was the case for Toronto. What did you make of the minis, the little mini divvy, the minutes divvied up between Kai Jones, Mark Williams, and then Kai playing 4 and 5?
Well, I think he played 4 because you need as much length as possible against Toronto. I mean, I think, Clifford is still thinking strategically about these games. It's not, he is trying to win these games. You just can't when the teams that you're playing are motivated to actually make the playoffs, unlike Dallas and OKC before them. These teams actually want to make the playoffs, Chicago and Toronto, and they're bigger, stronger, faster than the Hornets, especially that Toronto game. Siakam was just putting every shot he wanted to up against Thor. And I wasn't even like mad at some of these guys for the defensive things that were happening, at least in Toronto. I think Chicago, you could make a case that they didn't really play up to the level that we know that these baby bees can play.
Steve was mad about Chicago, but against Toronto, he was happy with what they did.
Yeah, so I think that's part of why Kai played the 4. With Kai Jones, it's kind of the same story. He's been consistent in his play, which is like you're going to get amazing dunks, you're going to get a lot of activity, you're going to get a lot of energy. Defensively, I would say generally he's in the right space, pick and roll wise, more often than Nick Richards is even. But, and this is a big but, he makes so many mistakes offensively. Like it's bad screens that result in turnovers. It's ball handling that results in turnovers, travels, and just general mistakes. Like if he's not being delivered to, right at the rim, there are going to be problems. And so that makes him difficult. It makes it difficult to see him playing serious minutes moving forward. I think, as frustrating as this is, I think he's still at least a season away.
Oh, yeah. But and at least we're seeing some good stuff from Kai. But you're right. By no means is he a finished product. And, yeah, you were talking about just the competition. I think that's the part that's impressive here, right? You were saying that these teams are playing for the playoffs. Dallas has just been reeling badly, but Charlotte caught them at the beginning of their reel, if you will, right? I mean, what they were doing beating a team that still is very much so trying all of the incentive is to get to the play-in and possibly the playoffs, and Dallas just isn't able to do so. OKC, you don't think so with Dallas?
Well, Dallas was in the middle of their reel. I mean, they had lost. I think they had lost a couple coming into Charlotte. So I think we caught them not at the very beginning, but they had already started to falter a little bit. And Luka and Kyrie are, I think, having issues playing with one another. So I think the real issue is that Dallas and OKC really didn't present defensive challenges to a Charlotte Hornets team.
They're both really, really small.
Yeah, and weren't motivated on the defensive end either, I thought. And Toronto and Chicago are the exact opposite. And the Hornets turned the ball over and over and over. Like, these two teams were able to expose the Charlotte Hornets' inexperience, whereas Dallas and OKC were really relying on their offense to carry them. And OKC didn't have SGA. Yeah,
no, for sure. So, I do think, especially with these last two games, though, even Steve said yesterday, he's like, look, he was laughing. It was like, what? Yeah.
What do you want from me?
It was kind of like that. Like, yeah. I mean, he realized, I was like, if we're going to put out, 3 of the 7 injured players, that game looks totally different. But Fred VanVleet dominated that game, is what he said. And this was a team that was motivated at 1:00, which is hard for players to do as they get in their routine. And VanVleet set the tone, and we have Teo Maledon, who's the only real point guard that we're putting out there. Well, and yeah, what do you want him to do?
What he should have said is, I want one of you to go out onto Trade and Try On right now, and if you can get one person to name the 3 highest scorers tonight on this team correctly, then I'll win the next game. Okay, but until then, if someone goes out and tells you and can name Svi Mikhailuk, who's been playing well, we understand that because we're watching closely.
We should talk about him a little bit, right? Like, is he?
Well, let's. We gotta save some fun for tomorrow.
I know. Okay, that's fine.
Svi was great, but I want to save some fun.
All right. Well, we'll save. It'll be Svi Tuesday, is what it'll be. We'll continue to do that as the season comes to a close, which coincidentally only has one more week. So perhaps that's a good thing if we're doing Svi Tuesdays at this point. All right, let's go to the next segment and then do CBA and mock drafts. Coming up next, Locked On Hornets.
Don't go to sleep on the Hornets just yet.
We'll tell you a couple prospects that Doug is looking at with these mock drafts. I have Svi still in the mind. Svi's mock draft. We'll tell you some of the prospects that we're looking at here. This episode is brought to you by Built Bar. If you're looking for a delicious treat but don't want all of the fat and the calories, then you got to try a Built Bar. If you're like me and you want to eat healthier but also you don't really want to compromise on the taste, then Built Bar is absolutely for you. They're covered in 100% real chocolate. They're low in calories, they're low in sugar, but they're high in protein and they're high in fiber. Plus, they come in awesome flavors. Churro, peanut butter brownie, all the coconut variations are also very good. Plus, if you're close to a Sam's Club, you can run in and grab a 13-bar box with favorite flavors listed, like brownie batter. Churro, as I mentioned, is a really popular one right now. So you can go to Sam's Club and get them in bulk. You can go to Walmart, go to the pharmacy section, pick up a 4-bar box of Built Bars, or you can just do it the old-fashioned way by visiting their website, built.com, BUILT.com. A big thanks to Built Bars, as always. One more segment to go. Locked On Hornets.
This is Locked On Hornets.
And would I have liked to see a few more shards? No, I would not have.
That's awesome shard.
Only on the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Before we get to the mock drafts, Doug, was there anything a part of the CBA leaks that were coming out over the weekend, just last week, that you thought was particularly noteworthy, maybe in its effect on the Hornets or just on the effect of the league overall? What's something that stood out to you?
Oh, yeah. I mean, if you don't know, the NBA and the Players Association seem to have come to an agreement on a new CBA for the next 7 years. That's super important. We avoid a lockout. We, avoid any damage that would be caused either to the NBA, the players, or, hey, maybe the guy who is a governor of the Charlotte Hornets that may be not wanting to be a governor of the Charlotte Hornets anymore and wanting to sell this team, I think it would be more difficult to sell a team if the NBA were to lock out. So I think there was some incentive here, certainly from the Charlotte Hornets to make this new CBA happen. So I think that's number one. I mean, they get to continue to play, and the Hornets have a lot of young players, and a lockout, I think, would have been, specifically harmful to a team that is trying to develop young talent, more so than a team with veterans that can just pick it right back up and go back at it again. But I think the other thing, Walker, to look at is some of the stuff that happened in terms of spending. There was obviously a push from small and mid-market teams to limit the ability of franchises to both invest a lot of money in the players that they drafted in these major extensions that take them well into the luxury tax, but then they also get mid-level exceptions. They also get abilities to add players. I think a lot of teams felt like, A, that's unfair, and B, it was limiting those small and mid-market teams to go after some of those mid-level exception type of players to get better, to try to compete with those teams. And so they've capped the ability for those major luxury tax spenders to have those moves. And then on the other side of that, they've given some more tools for all teams to utilize. They're going to be larger trade exceptions. There's new and expanded exceptions to the salary cap, which we don't have details on yet. But there could be some new exceptions like the mid-level and different things.
Well, there's one with the second-round pick, which I thought was honestly kind of pertinent to the Charlotte Hornets, at least under Mitch Kupchak, right? Yeah. And so Shams Charania put out there that the NBA and the PA new CBA will create a new second-round pick exception that can be used so teams will no longer need to dip into the mid-level exception to sign second rounders, just to kind of give detail to what you're talking about.
The Hornets
that's what I'm saying.
Utilize that. And then there's going to be less. Here's the one I think is most interesting. Less punitive system for teams at the lower end of the luxury tax. So I like this. I want the NBA and the NBPA to come together and coax a few of these teams who have been dancing around that luxury tax apron. Hey, come and spend a little bit more to win, and we won't hurt you as much. And so whether it's Jordan who owns this team moving forward, or it's, Gabe Kaplan and his group that owns this team moving forward, whatever happens, I hope that these new incentives to, hey, you can go into the luxury tax a little bit and it's not going to completely crush you year to year as a business. I like that idea.
Yeah, I do too. The only one I'll say is the minimum number of games played to be eligible for major individual awards is big. And 65 games is what Shams is reporting. Just to read the exact tweet, he said, NBA and NBAPA have agreed to a minimum number of games played, 65 games, for players to be eligible to win major individual league awards, such as MVPs in the new CBA. I don't know if that includes all NBA selections. I guess it would, right? With individual awards. And that's where it gets a little dicey. I understand they're trying to make sure that the guys don't skip out on as many games for rest. Mm-hmm. And I like that. I want the good players to play. Mm-hmm. 65 games is a decent amount. And if you look at this season, alone, Doug, Joel Embiid and Luka Doncic, the top two scorers in the NBA as it stands currently, they're at 64 games right now. So they're going to be able to take care of this threshold, but with only a week left of basketball, right? And it's not like I would want to hold off Joel Embiid or Luka Doncic on any of these all-NBA teams. Are you kidding me? So that would be something interesting. If you look at some of the other guys like Damian Lillard, what an incredible season for Damian Lillard. Damian Lillard only had 58 games under his belt before they kind of shut him down. Shai Gilgeous has 66.
Sorry, Lillard. Time to get on the court. I'm pointing to my wrist, doing the Damian Lillard thing. Time to get on the court.
That's true.
Dame time to get on the court. Oh, shush, Siri.
Yeah. Well, now the Dame time is talking back to you and saying "F you" is what the Dame time is saying. But yeah, Giannis has only played 62. I guess 65 is a lot. I don't know.
I think you're making the point, which is that we're talking about a couple of games margin difference. We can push these guys to play a little bit more on some, I think what's going to be tough is when guys have legitimate injuries that hit them, and keep them at 63 or 64 games. I did read that there will be some exceptions. So there might be a little bit of wiggle room there. We have to wait till all of these details come out. And you might be saying, whoa, wait a minute. Do these guys really care about the individual awards? Would that motivate them to play? But you have to understand that the All-NBA, they're all tied into incentives for your contract.
Yeah.
So it's not even really about the hardware. It's about the fact that if you get All-NBA, you get a bag load of money. So I think it will move some of these players, again, on those marginal nights where it's like, well, I could play, I couldn't play. I'll decide not to play because the playoffs really matter more. Now the NBA is pushing that. And the other thing I'll say is, like, I think that's a situation and a rule change that could be easily fixed. If we go through a season and people are really legitimately mad at the names that are left off, that 65, I think, easily could become 60 without having to wait 7 years for the new CBA.
No, I think it could be fixed. And I am interested, because if it's not, Doug, then the other problem with this, you're right about the margins where, okay, maybe Joel Embiid does play against Nikola Jokic and you don't have him rest, right? That was a real bummer. We wanted to see the MVP guys, the leaders in the clubhouse, go at it, and Joel Embiid didn't play. And so maybe he does play if you have the 65-game threshold. But the other thing is that we measure these players' greatness in historical context based off of a lot of these individual awards. And so when we do that, and let's say some of these players only get to 60, and there's not an exception made, and they get that, especially if you're talking about a couple of players that only play 60 games in multiple seasons, but they're still clearly great and still top 15 players to make an All-NBA selection, but maybe they don't get there. Maybe they're not even eligible to get an MVP award, so they're not even in the top 5, right? Think about that. If you start to look at the top 5 finishers in MVP ballots and somebody plays 60 games, let's say it's Joel Embiid, who is the second best, but he only plays in 60, so he's not even on the ballot. Therefore, he doesn't have a top 5 finish. That stuff matters too when trying to evaluate. So I just hope we kind of fix the evaluation if this thing is here to stay, and this becomes a real problem holding out players to not be eligible for these awards that they're so clearly deserving at least to be in the running in.
Well, a couple of other Hornets ties. I don't know if this applies to Rookie of the Year, but LaMelo only played 51 games his rookie season. So if it does apply to Rookie of the Year,
right,
then that would
leave that up to the voter, man. Like I get it, to some of this, leave it up to the voter. If it makes players play more, then okay, I'll shut up. And that's ultimately the intent.
And the red. So I think it shouldn't apply to Rookie of the Year, because like rookies want to play. Like it's not like we're incentivizing them to rest or play. Right. Like they want to get out on the floor. So really, and again, we don't know. I haven't seen anything about
away from LaMelo. But you take it away from him,
Also, here's another Hornets tie. It means that really, I think we can say definitively that Gordon Hayward will not win an MVP.
Now we know. Whew, I was still holding out hope, but now we know.
Did you see the All-NBA also going positionless?
Oh, that's great. Well, everybody's been clamoring for that forever, so that's fantastic.
Yeah, but okay, I get like wanting to eliminate the center position. But I don't know that I wouldn't be in love with a 5-point guard or a 5-guard All-NBA team. Like I really would have liked to see like 2 guards and 3 bigs or something. Because I think when I look back at All-NBA teams, I do like the fact that I could imagine them, being a team. But again, I think this was a case of, all right, look, if we're going to make All-NBA part of the incentive structure of contracts, then we must incentivize players to play their absolute best. And if you're the 3rd or 4th best forward in the NBA, it's like, well, I'm not going to make it because they've got these other positions. So I understand it. I wish they wouldn't have made it completely positionless, though.
Right. Well, and Joel Embiid is the example there too, right? He's going to be second in MVP possibly, and that means he's going to be second team All NBA, which is poor Joel with Nikola just winning these MVPs. It's held him away from a couple first team All NBA selections there. All right, do you want to do one mock draft at least? We got to give the people at least something we promised on. Do you want to try to rapid fire through this, Doug?
I only have 2 new ones. People are really quiet on the mock draft, and this usually happens in March because people are paying attention to the tournament. And so hopefully as we ramp up towards, We've got May coming up, and that's going to be combine time. As we start to ramp up, hopefully people get on these mock drafts and give me some more fuel for my fire here. But I've got 2 here just really quickly, and I want to dig into these tomorrow. We don't have time to dig in right now, but just join us tomorrow. I'll bring these back up because I think there's some interesting things to look at here. So with The Athletic, they've got a new mock draft from Sam Vecini. He has the Hornets at 4, taking Amen Thompson, and then Julian Strother is the pick at the end of the first round. And I think Brandon Miller went 3 in that draft. He's still got Scoot going 2, Wemby obviously going 1, so that's how the top 4 fell. In the Ringer draft, the new mock draft that the Ringer has from Kevin O'Connell, this was March 23rd. They're doing sort of a randomized, they run through the tankathon essentially and mix it up a little bit. So the Hornets fall to 6th, and they take Jarris Walker from Houston, and they're still taking Dariq Whitehead with that 2nd pick.
Okay, Jarris Walker, as much as we've talked about him, it's interesting positionally with the Charlotte Hornets team. So yeah, we'll see. Well, I'm interested to see just how much he's valued, because he's not like one of these takeover guys, but he is highly skilled. And then Dariq Whitehead, another interesting name too, who is one of the Blue Devils that did enter the draft with Filipowski expected to come back, by the way, so not even going to be eligible. That's kind of an interesting note. If that does take place, Tyrese Proctor coming back. So what do you have, Doug?
On the position, because I've seen a lot of comments, hey, Wemby would be better in San Antonio because the Hornets already have a center in Mark Williams. How would that work? Or Scoot, how do you make Scoot work with LaMelo and so on and so forth? To me, if you get one of those top 2 picks, you make it work. You figure it out. Like Wemby can play alongside Mark Williams. In fact, it might benefit Wemby to play alongside Mark Williams, because Mark Williams can go in and try to do some of the dirty work and leave Wemby's body to develop slowly in the NBA instead of taking that beating night in and night out. So, but I think positionally it shouldn't matter. Now, once you get into, I think, that 6th pick, then it might start to matter a little bit, and that's why I think if they drop down to 6, I would be more comfortable with them, picking up the phone. If they're serious about winning next season, pick up the phone and see what assets you can bring back for that 6th pick.
All right, thanks for making us your first listen. We're free and available anywhere you get your pods. Now make your second listen game to game NBA. Every moment, every top performance, every result. Locked On Game to Game covers every game from across the NBA with local analysis that only Locked On can deliver. Follow Game to Game on Locked On NBA, available on the Odyssey app, YouTube, and wherever you get your pods. We appreciate it, Doug. You got one other thing.
One more thing. One more tease for those that have stuck around this long. I've got one more tease. I've got one more conspiracy theory for tomorrow, and it involves Patrick Ewing.
Oh, he's been there, baby. He's got the hat. He's looking G. He's awfully close to the court. Find out what the conspiracy theory is tomorrow. Have a great rest of your day.